Welcome to the Kelly Green Room. I'm Jonah, and I'm joined with the very first live episode in person of the Kelly Green Room podcast with Bill Werndl. Thank you so much for joining
Jonah,
me.
I really appreciate you having me on the show. Thank you.
And I really appreciate you being here. And I've talked to some other people in the sports broadcasting industry, but nobody who's done as much with as much experience as you. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, I appreciate that. It's been a long journey.
Yeah.
I started 60 years ago. You weren't even thought of it at that time.
Yeah.
And it's been a great journey. I mean, I grew up in Sharon Hill, and I was not a great athlete. And I said, I still want to be in sports. How do I pursue my dream? And I had opportunities. When Wilt Chamberlain came to Sharon Hill High School, I was the PA announcer. And that kind of got me rolling a little bit. And then, of course, I started my career at Channel 6 in the mailroom at 55 hours a week. And I got to know different people, and somebody said, would you like to do football on the weekends? At Temple University, there used to be another pro team in town by the name of the Continental Bulldogs football team. And Wayne Harden, the legendary coach from Temple and Navy, was the coach. So I would go up there, help the director and producer. We would chart the plays. And remember, we would replay the game opposite the NFL. It wasn't the big monster it is today. We replay the game 12-2 on Sunday, and we did that during the football season. Then we moved on to Penn football after the Continental League folded, and it's been a lot of fun. I mean, I've met so many great people, and you don't do it on your own. You have to have people behind you. I've had people like Bill White, who became the first African-American play-by-play announcer, became the first ever National League president, the highest-ranking black official in all of sports back in 1989. Stan Hochman, a legendary writer here in Philadelphia. Chuck Bednarik. I can go through the litany of people, but I've had a lot of people push me along the way. You don't do it on your own. And you never turn down a job, I'll tell you. Never turn down a job. That's always been my motto.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I've talked to a lot of professional broadcasters. That is the one thing that every single one of them say. So I really appreciate that advice. And to me, it's obvious that you've really loved sports for your entire life. What about sports really drew you into wanting to do this for your entire career?
My father wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer. And I said to him, that's not my cup of tea. And I really, I loved being around the athletes. I really loved being in the action. I wasn't that good of an athlete growing up, but I just liked it. There was something about it. It was very compelling. Today it's a little different with the athletes. Back in the day when I started, you had access to the players. Today it's very difficult to get access to the players because they put up a barrier because they want to protect the players. Back in the day, you got to know every player on a first-name basis. You threw the names, Pete Rose, Ron Jaworski, Dick Vermeil. You knew these guys, and they knew you. But today, it's a little different because the PR people are putting up barriers. They want to protect the players. Now, the players don't help themselves, like recently with A.J. Brown's cryptic comments. What do we need that for? But, again, the last time I remember, when I covered sports, I mean, I'm not covering, I do a little radio show, but the last time I covered sports, you could ask the players questions without people hovering over you and making sure that you ask the right question.
Yeah, I mean, that's really different from nowadays. Like, I can't imagine a world in which athletes are just, readily available to...
Not readily available today. Really, it's very, very difficult. I mean, I think that Jalen Hurts may speak once a week. Sirianni maybe twice a week. It's very, very difficult because the players today, again, they make so much money. And I don't know how long they can sustain themselves that way because eventually the advertisers are going to say, enough is enough. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like every time you think the bubble is about to burst, they keep on getting more and more money.
Yeah, that's how sports is. And you mentioned Wilt Chamberlain earlier. Your first professional interview was with Wilt Chamberlain. And how did you really prepare for that, to talk to the best player
Well, I
in the
was
NBA?
told to get down and interview Wilt Chamberlain when he signed a mega deal with the Philadelphia 76ers back in the mid-'60s. It was the biggest contract ever. So I went down there, and I was nervous. I was, this is one of the greatest athletes ever. And I was really nervous. And I got there, and he put his arm around me. He said, "Kid, don't worry about a thing." And things started to roll. I consider Wilt the greatest basketball player ever to play the game. People say, Michael Jordan, LeBron James. I said, no. Wilt Chamberlain changed the rules. Wadding the lane. You can't guide the ball in the basket any longer. I mean, there were so many things. You can't throw the ball at the backboard. It has to hit the rim. He had all those rules implemented during his tenure as a professional athlete. I mean, Wilt could do anything he wanted. I had the opportunity when I was in San Diego to be very good friends with Alex Hanneman's coach. He said to me, if Wilt wanted to score 50 one night, he'd go out and score 50. If he wanted to get 30 rebounds, he'd get 30 rebounds. If he wanted to block 10, 12 shots, he would do that. If he wanted to have 20 assists in a game, no athlete can say they could do that. All right? The only problem with Wilt, he couldn't shoot fouls. But a lot of big guys have problems with that.
Yeah, that is pretty consistent even now.
Right.
Giannis Antetokounmpo, Shaquille O'Neal can't shoot fouls. So there's a pretty big story about Wilt Chamberlain that he scored 100 points in a game. Do you believe that that's true?
Absolutely. I listened to the game on radio. It was a Friday night. We had a pickup basketball game at my buddy Billy Todd's house in Sharon Hill the day before. The next morning, everybody was running up the garage and trying to dunk the ball. I listened to that game on radio with Bill Campbell. I was not there, but it is true.
Yeah,
anybody that says it's not true, it is true. I mean, he had a number of guys foul out of the game, but it is a true story. Anybody that says it didn't happen, I like to talk to them face to face. It did happen.
Okay, I believe you. I'm not gonna deny it any longer. So changing topics a little bit, you've worked in so many different jobs. You're versatile. You're a producer. You do podcasts. You've done basically everything. How do you think you developed all these skills in these different areas?
Well, I've been very lucky. As I've said, I was on the mailroom, and then I worked on the newsreel part-time. I was working with sports. Then Charlie Swift gave me my first break spotting football games. All right? I've done over 1,200 football games in 135 different stadiums in this country. So I had the opportunity. And again, you just have to be very, very persistent, and you have to hit basically the books. You have to be willing to pay the price. I mean, I've done 2 games in one day during the football season. I did a game in Indianapolis, then flew to Cleveland to do a Sunday night game with Jack Buck and Hank Strand.
Wow.
And I went to Japan. I'll tell you this story. I went to Japan for 19 hours. The Eagles played a preseason game in Japan. And Fred Godelli, the executive producer for NBC Sports, called me and said, "Can you leave Wednesday?" I said, "I can't leave Wednesday. I got to leave Friday." I flew 13 and a half hours over to Japan. We did the game on Sunday morning. It was 11 o'clock back here on the East Coast. And then Jim Mora, when I walked into the hotel, he was coaching the Saints at the time, said, "When did you get here?" I said, "Just now." He said, "When are you leaving?" I said, "Tomorrow after the game on the Eagles charter." So I've done that as well. I'm crazy to a certain extent. But
I think you have to be in this
Well,
business.
you have to have a passion.
Yeah.
If you don't have a passion, forget it.
I think that's amazing, and passion, you just gotta follow it.
Right.
That's very inspiring. So thank you so much for telling that story. If you had to pick one, which job have you loved the most in your career?
Well, I love doing talk radio, but today talk radio has changed dramatically. There's a lot of people that have not paid their dues, and I'm not going to mention names. You gotta pay your dues. You gotta take the bumps in the road. And a lot of these kids today, I say kids, they make these statements about players and all that. I heard one person the other day say, a schedule loss or acceptable loss. No loss is ever acceptable.
I agree.
Or ever scheduled. Anybody that makes a comment like that, they got to be in a loony bin somewhere. Believe me.
I completely agree. I don't know who it was. I'm not going to name names either, but. Right. You just can't say it's a
There's no such thing. If you talk to any athlete, this game, you're scheduled to lose. What do you mean I'm scheduled to lose? You want to go out there and win every game.
I completely agree because you can't tell the game has happened until the game has happened.
Right.
I talked with Paul Jolovitz, who you're very familiar with.
I know Paul quite well. We do a show.
He said exactly the same thing.
Right.
So that I'm glad that you agree with that. And changing gears a little bit, you've covered so many different teams, like you said, over 1,200 football games. If you had to pick one team from one specific year that was the best, any sport.
Well, I think the Flyers in the mid-'70s when won back-to-back Stanley Cups, that was a lot of fun. They were a great bunch of guys to be with because, they were just good to be around. They were fun people. They brought the first championship to Philadelphia back in the day. And that was a fun team to be around. I got to know every one of those players, and on a first-name basis, I had everybody's number. And, of course, the Eagles when they went to the Super Bowl. I knew the Phillies when they won their first World Series ever. I was in that locker room. Sixers when they won it in '83. We mic'd up the owner, Harold Katz, for the championship game when they swept the Lakers out there. So, I've been very, very fortunate in that regard. I can't pick one team because I've had so many great memories. I've been around so many great players. The other day, it was funny, I was in Kansas City to do a game, and this little guy is walking across the lobby. And I said, that must be Wayne Gretzky. I went up to him. I said, Wayne, how you doing? I remember when I did talk radio in Southern California, he used to listen every day. So I went to the Lakers-Sixer game, game one, when Allen Iverson stepped over Tyronn Lue. You remember that? All right?
Well, I don't remember because I wasn't there, but I know of it.
You know of it. I remember I was walking to my seat, and Gretzky was at the game as well. And he turned to me, and I said, hi, Wayne. He said, hi, Philly Billy. I said, what? Wayne Gretzky knows who I am. It was flattery, and I saw him, and I reminisced about that story. But, talk about a great hockey player. Now, there's a debate. Who was greater, Gretzky or Howe? Remember, Howe was a real tough defensive player as well. But Gretzky was the greatest scorer of all time. But he was just a wonderful, wonderful guy.
I agree with Gretzky, and we could go back and forth talking about hockey forever because I love hockey. And I'd like to focus back in on that Flyers team because they were such a different team than anything I've ever heard of, ever seen.
Intimidation was the name of the game. And they would go in the rinks and, people were afraid to come to Philly. But when they were on the road, they were the best drawing team in all of hockey. Remember, back in the day, it wasn't that easy to sell tickets. And the Flyers were just really disliked around the league because they were the Broad Street Bullies. We just lost a great one in Bernie Perron, who was just a wonderful man. I'll give you a quick story on Bernie. He lost his eye. His career's over. On a Friday night, he called my house. My dad picked up the phone. He said, tell Bill that I'm being released from the hospital tomorrow at 8:30. Have a camera crew there. That's what type of guy Bernie Perron was. Tremendous. And if it wasn't for Bernie Perron, Flyers do not win 2 consecutive Stanley Cups.
I agree because they drew the most penalties. You gotta have a good goalie to stop all those power play shots. So, I don't think a team nowadays could draw the most penalties and win the Stanley Cup. So how did they do that?
But look at the equipment. If you look at tape or film of when Bernie played in goal, the equipment wasn't like it is today. Most of these goaltenders look like the Michelin Man with all equipment.
I don't think we've ever seen a goalie as good as Bernie.
Tremendous player. It's unfortunate his career ended so abruptly with that eye injury.
Yeah, and rest in peace to Bernie Perron.
Absolutely.
I wish I had the pleasure of meeting him.
Oh, he's good. Some fun, hey. That was his expression. Some fun, hey.
And another expression, only the Lord saves more than Bernie Perron.
That's exactly. You've done your homework, my friend.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
I love the Flyers, so I can never forget about that. Changing gears a little bit, from one legend in Bernie Prawn to another legend in Merrill Reese. You have a very close relationship with him after working together for, 50, 60 years?
Well, I started with Merrill after Charlie Swift's tragic death in 1977. Worked with Merrill up till 82. Then I had opportunities to go to CBS with Jim Kelly, who worked at WCAU. And then I worked at TBS with Skip Carey on 1 year there. And then I worked about 27 years at ESPN with Ron Franklin. We did every big college football game that came down the pike. Ron Franklin was instrumental in making the SEC the best conference in football, because we did many of their games and really promoted the SEC. The SEC, when you do an SEC game, it's like going to a religious experience, because they don't start tailgating on a Saturday morning. They start on Wednesday, and it goes on and on. And, there's such dislike with Auburn and Alabama, Tennessee and Alabama. I mean, this is life and death for those people down in the South. They love their college football. I mean, everybody says, well, if the Falcons go to the Super Bowl, it's like an afterthought, because Georgia is the biggest team in Florida, in the state of Georgia. Not the Falcons, not like here.
Yeah, that can never happen here, and I think that's why the SEC remains dominant. Right. There are so many different conferences.
Right.
The Big Ten's doing whatever they're doing, but
right.
the SEC.
Well, the Big Ten. It's unfortunate that we have NIL.
Yeah.
Name, image, and likeness. But I blame one person and one person only, Mark Emmert, who ran the NCAA. My good friend, if you know Sonny Vaccaro, he was the guy that said, you have to pay the athletes. You have to pay them some type of stipend. They would get something, but minuscule compared to today. But they said, we'll sue you. They kept suing Sonny and other people, and every time the NCAA went to court, they lost the case. They're like 0 for 1 million. I mean, after a while, you get tired of losing. You'd think, put our hands up and surrender, but it was unbelievable. But it's a mess in college athletics today.
Agreed.
It really is, because it's the wild, wild west. Kids don't like the coach. He gets out of the program. Can put his name in the portal. So that's the big problem.
And how would you say fix that? I mean, the transfer portals.
If I had the answer to that, I'd be a billionaire.
Yeah.
Believe me, because it's such a complex problem. And the other problem that we're facing is with the kids today, that many of them, because they come from disadvantaged backgrounds, don't know they have to pay taxes. If you get $1 million, a third of that money's got to be put aside for taxes. Many of them don't know that. But you mentioned Merrill Reese. I mean, I've worked with Merrill for about 20 years, and he flies me to every game. Every game out of his own pocket.
Wow.
So, he'll say, okay, we're going to Minnesota, we're going to Green Bay. You got to make plans to go there. But he pays me out of his own pocket to do these games. So I really appreciate that.
That's pretty fantastic.
He's a great guy to work with. He's a very big stickler on detail. Be prepared. Get there early. Be ready to work. I spend about 5 to 6 hours a week in preparation for a game.
Wow. So
you have to prepare. If you don't prepare, you just don't throw the spotting boards out on the desk. You have to prepare for the games.
How would you say, I mean, you said you've worked with Merrill starting in the 70s, so
yeah.
How has he changed as a broadcaster?
He's just getting older. He used to use a lot of Grecian Formula 44, but he doesn't use that anymore.
Okay, so nothing about the style that he calls the game just older?
Merrill is a perfectionist, and he wants everything just right. I mean, so, you have to keep on top of it. Remember, this is his 49th year doing the Eagles. Next year, be number 50, as you well know, and that's quite a milestone. He's the longest tenured play-by-play announcer in NFL history.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yes.
I mean, he deserves it. He's one fantastic play-by-play guy. So.
Yeah, and he works at it. He works on his trade.
So I asked you how Merrill Reese has changed as a broadcaster. How do you think the entire sports broadcasting industry has changed?
Not for the better. And I don't want to sound like a fuddy-duddy old man, curmudgeon, I just think, as I said, you got to pay your dues. And so many of these guys have not paid their dues. I mean, I'll give you a great story. The legendary golf producer, director by the name of Frank Cherkinian worked at Channel 10 way back when in the 50s. And he was like what they call a grip or an assistant. And they used to have the SEAL Test Big Top, and they would bring elephants and animals into the station, and they'd actually have a circus.
Wow.
And they'd run that for an hour on Saturday morning. So one Saturday, the elephant decided he had to take care of some business, and the director said, the first guy that gets down there and cleans that up will be my assistant. Well, Frank Cherkinian ran down there with a shovel, got a big bucket, put the stuff in the bucket, and he said, you're my assistant. Frank Cherkinian later became the most prominent director-producer for CBS Sports on golf. He made golf what it is today on television because of that little move.
That is absolutely unreal. I cannot believe that. Well, I mean, I guess it's true.
It is true. Guys told me that. I wasn't there for that. I was still in grade school, but they told me that story. But that's what I'm telling you. You have to pay your dues.
You can never see that happen nowadays.
No.
I mean, we've seen digital streaming, social media rise nowadays. Theoretically, if you were getting into sports broadcasting now, how would you start?
Oh, boy. That's a great question. I mean, as I said, it's so different today. It used to be the athletes would trust you, and they felt comfortable with you. But today, I mean, the players, as I said earlier in the conversation, are very, very guarded what they do. I mean, they're isolated from the media. You can't have that relationship you once had. That's the thing that bothers me the most. Because the problem is the little thing they call cell phones with the cameras. Players like to have their privacy. And unfortunately, in this day and age, you can't have your privacy. Because everybody's got a cell phone. And if you just step out of line, bang, bang, bang. It's all over the social media. So they're always looking over their shoulder. They're really reluctant.
Agreed. And another thing that I've noticed has really grown in sports media nowadays is like hot take media. I feel as though no broadcaster can really say what they feel because they have to get the clicks. They have to say something controversial.
And they use the clicks. And it may be just ridiculous, the clicks, but they do it because they want the attention. And as you said, the more clicks you get, the better off you are. I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not a big clicker.
I mean, I know that you have some bold opinions as well that you actually do believe.
Right.
That's what I've heard at least.
Right.
And if you had to pick one opinion, you'd stand by to the ends of the earth forever. What opinion would you pick that some people might not agree with?
Well, I certainly think the problem in sports today, we'll go back to the NCAA. And a lot of people look at this and say, oh, it's a shame what's happening. No, it's not a shame what's happening. It's a shame that the academic institution, what they say student athlete, is not true. They're not educating the student athlete. They could care less. They're using him as a pawn because they'll put money in their pocket, whether it's a big stadium or a big arena. And that's the one thing that I look at today that really, I'm very disappointed because they say student athlete, you see at the NCAA tournament. They're not student athletes. They're pay for play. They're professional athletes. But that's one take. Another thing is when they rip Jalen Hurts. I hear people rip Jalen Hurts unbelievably. Look at his numbers. He's been to 2 Super Bowls. He's won 1. He should have been the MVP of the other one. Unfortunately, had that one fumble, and the Eagles couldn't stop Kansas City at the end. But this guy is one heck of a player. And he knows how to win. That's the key. Are you a winner or you're a loser? And he is the ultimate winner. I don't care about style points. That's for figure skating, not for football or baseball. Do the job, get it done. And the other thing in sports that really bothers me, and you may disagree, I hate the analytics people. These people upstairs that are dictating to managers, general managers in all sports have kind of ruined the game. It's, this launch angle. I don't care what the launch angle and velocity off the bat is. Did it go over the wall? Simple as that. All right? Again, they have all these little nuances they use, and I can't take it. I really can't. I mean, my good friend's Bruce Bochy. He's won 4 world championships. And I'll give you a story about him. There was a guy named Paul DePodesta worked with the Padres with Sandy Alderson. And he would bring the lineup card down to Bruce Bochy and hand it to him. This was before Bochy had the success with the Giants and the Rangers. And he said, we want you to play this lineup. And Bochy would look at it. That's one of the reasons he was let go by the Padres. And he'd crumple it up and throw in the wastebasket. And I was in his office one day. He said, I put my lineup together on gut feel. And that's what's missing for the sport. We're not robots. I mean, you can't measure a guy's heart or measure a guy, even if his numbers don't dictate that. I think too many times they're over-analyzing sports today.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I think it's more important for a player to hit a home run than to have a 105-mile-per-hour flyout. So,
well, again, it's ridiculous. It's totally absurd. It was 120 miles off the bat. The best player I ever saw in baseball in Philadelphia, the best pure hitter, and I get a lot of arguments from a lot of people. Dick Allen was the best.
Hall of Famer.
Well, he should have been in the Hall of Fame 30 years ago. Dick Allen hit the ball harder than anybody. Bill White, who's my close friend, said, I never saw a guy hit a ball any harder. Dick Allen had a lifetime average of 292, 351 in home runs. And you know what? He accumulated a lot of those stats when they threw off a 15.5-inch mound. He put up numbers that will never be eclipsed. If he played today, he would average 70 home runs a year. If he played at Citizens Bank Park, that's a bandbox. He would have a ball with that ballpark.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned Dick Allen because I think he's a player who just really has recently gotten recognition, who has deserved it for so long.
If you look at his numbers, and you've done your research, if you look at his numbers, in a 10-year period, they were comparable to Willie Mays, Henry Aaron, all the great players, Mickey Mantle. All his numbers equate to what those guys did for 10 years. What were the sports writers thinking about? You base it on ability, not because he didn't talk to you and things like that. Look, you base a player on performance, not because he would, give you an interview or things like that. Performance only.
Very true. And I think that actually relates back to what you just said about Jalen Hurts. This is technically an Eagles podcast, so I'd like to fulfill my quota of Eagles talk.
That's all right.
And I know you. I know you had some strong words about Jalen Hurts and in favor of what he's done so far. So
absolutely.
I have a little list of quarterbacks in the NFL. I'd like to ask you if you think Jalen Hurts is better than each quarterback I have on my list. Would you pick Jalen Hurts or Dak Prescott?
Jalen Hurts, no question.
Jalen Hurts or Jared Goff?
Jalen Hurts.
Jalen Hurts or Justin Herbert?
Justin Herbert hasn't done it in the postseason. Let's get over the hump, all right?
I completely agree so far. Jalen Hurts or Jaden Daniels?
I have to see more of Jaden Daniels, all right? He had 1 year, all right? I'll take Jalen Hurts.
Agreed. Now here's where I think it gets very, very difficult. Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson?
I'll take... How many Super Bowls has Lamar Jackson won?
0. He hasn't made one either.
And the same with Allen.
Yep, he was the next guy on
my
list.
Both those guys haven't won a Super Bowl. Hurts has won a Super Bowl and has gone to a Super Bowl. Buffalo and Baltimore have not gone to Super Bowls with these quarterbacks. And you're going to ask me about Patrick Mahomes.
I am going to ask you about Patrick Mahomes. He's the last
Patrick Mahomes, he's won 3 Super Bowls, all right? Great quarterback. You know the story that Kansas City was thinking about drafting Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
Before they decided Brett Veach said you gotta take this kid from Texas Tech, and they took Patrick Mahomes, and the rest is history. But I would give the edge right now to Patrick Mahomes, just a slight edge.
I go back and forth because Mahomes hasn't looked nearly as incredible as he has, but he's made the Super Bowl. So I don't think
30 years old too.
I don't think you can discount that. And what I've said for as long as Jalen Hurts has been in the league is I don't care how many passing yards he throws to, did he win the game?
See, a lot of people are fantasy freaks. All right, they love the fantasy numbers. I've never been into fantasy. All right, never. Baseball, football, basketball, hockey. I look at the guy's body of work. Does he win the game? I don't care if he throws for 9 yards or 390 yards. If he's throwing for 390, means his team is behind. So I look at what he does and what his team does, and that's why I value Hurts so much.
I completely agree, and I do love fantasy football, so I have a little bit of a hard time drawing that.
I have a tough time. You know, I have a tough time with if you take a guy from the Cowboys and he's on your fantasy team. How do you root for the Eagles when you have a guy from the Cowboys on your fantasy team?
It's very difficult. That's what I'll say.
Very difficult, I know.
But I do draw the distinction because A.J. Brown this season is averaging, 10 fantasy points? He's one of the best receivers in the league. So
he's got to run a few more different patterns, too. And they've got to use the bubble screen, got to put him in motion periodically. There's a lot of ways to incorporate him.
Yeah, I mean, that was my next question. Are you worried about how this offense has utilized?
Yes, I'm worried too. Let me see what they do tomorrow against Denver, because this will be a very tough test. I mean, Denver's a very good, as we talked at the outset, a very good defensive team. And Patrick Surtain may be one or two as far as shutdown corners in the league. But
Defensive Player of the Year.
This will be very, very interesting to see how the Eagles play the chess game. Does Surtain match up with A.J. Brown, or does he just go on the side of the formation, whether it's left or right? He matches up with Devontae Smith. I think Peyton and his defensive coordinator, Vance Joseph, may say, we want to lock down A.J. Brown. Now it's up to the other guys to pick up the slack.
Yeah, it's a fantastic defense. Players all over the field who can make plays.
Right.
Like not just Surtain. They also have Alex Singleton, former Eagle. They have Zach Allen on the defensive line. They have Nick Bonito, who was top 5 in Defensive Player of the Year voting. So that defense is going to be a real struggle.
You talk about defensive players. I know he gets in trouble all the time, and he has to mature. But you talk about a guy that I want on the field late in the game is Jalen Carter.
Agreed, 100%.
Jalen Carter, there's something about his motor when the game is on the line. And last week he was hurting. He had a bad shoulder, and he came up real big against Tampa Bay. He put the pressure on the quarterback that Mayfield had to get the ball out, and the ball was incomplete. But that was Jalen Carter.
Yeah, Jalen Carter, it doesn't always show up in the stat sheet what he does, but he just is pressuring the quarterback every single play.
And Jordan Davis is developing into a good defensive lineman as well.
Yeah, I mean, we saw that with a blocked field goal the other week. He finally got some recognition for that. So, do you think the Eagles are going to win this week?
I hope they're going to win. I think they have a very good shot. They're at home. If they were playing in Denver, I'd give the call to Denver. But I think the Eagles will prevail. They've got to show me more on offense. They've got to do some different things. You look at Kansas City's offense, they do a lot of different wrinkles. I'd like to see some of those wrinkles implemented with Kevin Patullo and the Eagles.
I agree. I think the offenses that use motion in the pre-snap, that expose the defensive formation,
exactly.
They always do better, and the Eagles need to do that more.
And I'm worried about Lane Johnson. How much does he have left in the tank? He's breaking down a lot.
Yep.
He's 35 years old. They got to address that situation. They have a couple of young offensive linemen they drafted. Miles Hinton, whose father was a great offensive lineman, Chris Hinton, and the Cameron Williams. They hope to develop those guys, but they probably will have to draft a offensive lineman either the first or second round next year.
I agree. When Lane Johnson's on the field, he's the best player on the field, but can he stay on the field?
That's the problem.
Yeah.
And I had a debate with Ray Dittinger, the noted writer and TV, radio analyst. We had a player here in Philadelphia by the name of Bob Boomer Brown and Lane Johnson. He said, I'm going to give the edge to Lane Johnson. I said, Ray, I saw Boomer and so did you. Boomer Brown was probably the most devastating offensive tackle I ever saw play. And the other thing that's going to hurt Lane, as far as my opinion, remember he got caught twice with steroids. Yes. That is a no-no.
Yeah, can't do that.
But remember, the new chemist is in town now. They know how to get around the steroids.
I don't know if I've heard that yet. I think players are becoming a lot more careful about what they put in their bodies.
But again, a guy doesn't go from 200 pounds to 320 pounds, all right? That doesn't happen eating bananas and drinking milkshakes.
I think I'm going to use that motto from now on. So,
but you don't know. I mean, I'm not saying Lane does it or he doesn't do it, but I just think that you have to wonder about guys going from when they entered college at 200 pounds and they're now 325 pounds. That's not normal, I don't think. I'm not a doctor, and I don't profess to be a doctor. I've seen it over the years where they're always a step ahead of the leagues because, these players want to make that money and they want to get a shortcut, and a lot of them do it.
Yeah, well, whatever Lane is doing, I'm glad it's working, and I really hope that it's legal. So,
again, I'm not accusing Lane of anything, but I'm just saying that those 2 suspensions with a steroid is going to hurt him a little bit. He'll be in the Hall of Fame, but people will say, when they're evaluating, was he really on this or off that?
Well, I think that's a good question to ask, and my last Eagles question, we're going to go back from this present day to quite a bit ago. I heard a story about Chuck Bednarik body slamming you. Could you explain that?
Chuck worked at Channel 6 back in the day. And Chuck, of course, was a menacing figure. 6'3", 238, was cut out of granite. And we were in the newsroom at Channel 6, and I said to Chuck, Chuck, would you show me how you knocked out Frank Gifford in that game at Yankee Stadium back in 1960? I said, sure. I figured it should be a love tap. Well, he gave me a forearm shiver in the chest. I think my chest caved in for about a week. But Chuck was devastated.
Yeah.
Chuck was the last of the real 60-minute men. I mean, he was a great, great player. He played with a passion. I mean, the only thing Chuck used to say, I didn't get paid as much as the players today. He used to bring that up all the time. But he was a great, great player. I mean, he played center and played linebacker. And he was just a tough hombre.
Yeah.
And, they had a great coach back then, Buck Shaw, who was a very innovative guy. And the Eagles weren't the most talented team. They were the only team to beat the Green Bay Packers during Lombardi's run.
Yep, the dynasty killer.
Yeah.
They did it with the Patriots, the Chiefs, and
right.
Go a while back to the
right.
Packers. But I don't think anybody now can do it like Chuck Bednarik. Not even close. They try with Travis Hunter, but he can't.
Well, again, Chuck's taking snaps at center. He's knocking around the defensive lineman. And then on the other side of the ball, he's making tackles and knocking people around. So Travis Hunter, how many times is he going to have to tackle people? He's a secondary guy.
And he's a backup corner, too. He's a starting wide receiver. He doesn't get as many snaps.
But he's a very talented player. He's going to see a lot of action, and he'll help Jacksonville become a viable playoff contending team.
I mean, I completely agree, and that's the value that a second overall pick has. And that's all I got today, so thank you so much
Not a problem.
For joining me.
Enjoy it.
Yeah, this has been the Kelly Green Room Podcast. I'm Jonah Castle, joined by the incredible Bill Werndl. Thank you so much for watching.